Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and this channel is all about, well, running great one-shot adventures. And sometimes that means trying out a brand new game with your group. So today, I'm going to review the new role-playing game designed for fast and furious action-adventure, Outgunned. Now, while I play a lot of fantasy and horror RPGs, I love the action genre, especially for one-shot adventures. In fact, running 1930s Indiana Jones-style pulp adventures are some of my favorite one-shots to run. But I'm also a sucker for 1980s-style, over-the-top action movies. After all, I grew up in a time when a hot summer day meant I might just get to spend it at the movies watching heroes like Schwarzenegger and Stallone jump in slow motion out of mid-air explosions. I've always wanted to do that. A little while ago, I reviewed Two Little Mice's Broken Compass, which was another RPG that focused on action and adventure, and I really liked it. It had a nice push-your-luck game mechanic, fast character creation, and its ability to run action-packed sessions without a lot of GM prep was great. I was also a little disappointed that despite a big launch, Broken Compass virtually disappeared from the Earth soon after its release. I can only assume it was secreted away into a hidden government warehouse, maybe one day to return. Well, Outgunned is the spiritual sequel to Broken Compass. It's designed to be the best game at handling a wide range of balls-to-the-wall action adventures like the ones that blew away my summers all those years ago in the 80s and 90s. But with the core book and its supplements, it promises to let you easily recreate everything from those action movies to sci-fi shooters like Star Wars and Starship Troopers to more modern fare like gritty games based on John Wick or Kingsman. Now, before I jump into my review, I want to give you a little background on the RPGs that I like, just so you can see where my review is coming from. I grew up playing Dungeons & Dragons, and I think 5th edition is still a solid version of the game, but I prefer the danger and faster pace of old school role-playing like Dungeon Crawl classics. I generally prefer skill-based systems over level-based ones though, because I love playing so many different RPG genres. You know, some days my friends and I are in the mood for horror, other days we want a gritty sword and sorcery adventure, and sometimes we like to do more unusual stuff like Old West or science fiction. My all-time favorite RPGs are Call of Cthulhu and GURPS, but lately I've been really impressed and playing a lot of the Year Zero engine games like Vaesen and the Alien RPG. My love for so many different genres and games has inspired me to write over 30 free adventures on my blog, oneshotadventures.com, which are almost always written for different game systems, and you can also go there and check out my design thinking behind each of those adventures. Check it out. But let's talk Outgunned. If you've seen my review of Broken Compass, there are a lot of similarities between these two games, but I'll do a separate review that covers the differences. This review assumes you know nothing about Broken Compass or its system, and I'm going to do this review with an ups and down system, so if I really like something in the game, it's going to get an up. But if I'm a little skeptical about something, well, it's going to get a down. Here we go. Outgunned is all about action-adventure. It's a generic RPG, which means that its core book flexibly covers modern time periods, but then there's a separate supplement called Action Flicks, which gives gamers plugins to shift the setting to different genres like science fiction, monster hunting, and even pirates. No respect, pirates. So with the core book, you can run just about any action movie that you can think of. The fact that this game launched with the ability to do that and already has expansions for other popular action genres starts Outgunned with an up. But let's talk about the core system. Action movies are notoriously fast-paced and frantic. Can the Outgunned mechanics keep up with that? Well, every hero in Outgunned has 5 attributes and 20 skills. So here's Drake Rook, the action hero of this video. When the director or game master asks you to do something cool, you're going to pick one of those skills and then roll a handful of 6-sided dice equal to how many points you have in that skill, plus usually the attribute above it. So let's imagine an intense nightclub sequence where Drake Rook is trying to desperately push his way through a crowd to stop an infamous assassin before she escapes to her helicopter on the roof.
Everybody out of my way! I need to get to the chopper!
The player debates trying to forcibly push his way through the crowd, but there's a lot of people and his brawn and force skill just isn't that great. So instead, Drake Rook decides that he's going to intimidate the crowd, firing a few shots into the air to get them to move.
Everybody get down!
The GM asks the player for a critical success on a smooth and speech roll to clear the crowd, catch up to the assassin, and save the day. Drake has 3 points in smooth and 2 in speech, so he's going to roll 5 dice. Outgunned is designed for special dice with different symbols on each face, but 95% of the time the symbols don't matter at all, and you can use regular 6-sided dice. But I'm going to show you the official Outgunned dice in this video. Kind of like Yahtzee, you're looking for matches on the dice that you roll. Like I said, the symbols usually almost never matter, or if you're using regular D6s, the numbers almost never matter. If you get 2 of a kind, like this, you get a basic success. 3 of a kind is a critical success, which is a typical difficulty in Outgunned. 4 of a kind is an extreme success, 5 of a kind is an impossible success, and 6 of a kind is known as a jackpot. If you roll multiple successes on your roll, you get to do multiple actions on your turn. So if Drake here rolls a critical success and an extra basic success, he not only clears the crowd, but he also gets one of the bouncers and intimidates them to open the door to the stairwell so that he can race up the stairs and catch up to that assassin that he's chasing, letting him close the distance and maybe even giving him a shot on her.
I see you!
That all happens in just 1 turn with a good roll. If you roll no successes, your turn's over. But as long as you roll at least 1 success, you can take a chance and re-roll any of the non-matching dice to do something better. If this second roll adds to your successes, awesome, you're doing better. But if you don't roll any more successes, you actually lose one of your previous successes. You can even do this a 3rd time, going all in. But if you fail to roll any more successes, you actually lose all your successes altogether. And if you ever roll a jackpot, that's 6 successes, which is pretty tough, you actually get to take over as the game master for a turn, which is a total blast for players. As you can tell, the core system of Outgunned is a push your luck system. Once your players figure it out, which I've seen take half an hour or an hour at the table to really grok for new players, it feels really fun. And I think it's great for an action game. When I've run Outgunned, players really get into the system. They're interacting a lot more with each other on their dice rolls versus other games. When someone gets a mediocre roll, there's always another player who's going to cheer them on and tell them to go for that re-roll. And inevitably, you have those players who always push their luck too far and end up in really bad situations constantly, which is totally par for the course for an action movie. So overall, Outgunned's game mechanics are really fun. It's interactive, there's a roller coaster of events that can happen, so the core dice system is definitely getting an up. Now, I'll also mention here that Outgunned is a fail-forward game. Basically, that means that players never really fail at something. If Drake Rook had missed his roll to clear the crowd, the assassin doesn't simply escape, but maybe she has time to radio in 2 big bad bald thugs to block the stairwell, ready to kick Drake's butt. If you haven't GM'd a fail-forward system before, it does take some practice, but it feels really good for a game that's trying to emulate those action movies where the heroes just always barrel on forward towards the climax of the movie. I'll also mention here that the GM never makes rolls in Outgunned. Only the players do, with the GM setting the difficulty of the challenges And I'm honestly a little mixed on this. I really like rolling dice as a GM, but I'll admit it does work because the game does give me some other resources to play with as a GM, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now, there are a few things that can modify your rolls in this game. If someone gives up their turn to help you, you'd get a bonus die to roll. So if Drake Rook's buddy Roscoe starts helping out, yelling at the people to get out of the way, the GM could throw Drake an extra die to roll. Also, all heroes start with usually a point of something called adrenaline, which they can spend to get another bonus die to add to their total. You can earn more adrenaline at the table for doing cool things like clever plans, or making a sacrifice, or being down to your last point of grit, which is the hit points of this game. Also, I love that being on your last hit point gives you a free point of adrenaline, so even as you're dying, you're about to go for it and up the ante in the action, so that gets an up too. Next, there are conditions. As the game goes on, the GM can grant these conditions when they feel right, which forces a player to subtract a die from usually a certain type of roll. So for example, let's say Drake really botches his rolls to fight off those bald thugs and he takes a lot of damage at that nightclub. He does defeat them, but this gives the assassin that he's chasing extra time to take a hostage, and it's Drake's girlfriend, Natalia. The players at the table roar in frustration, and now the GM says that Drake looks angry. So this is going to give him a -1 die to all rolls that require calm and precision for the rest of this scene. There's about a half dozen conditions or so that the GMs can give out. It's a pretty free-form system. When I last ran Outgunned, one of my players got trapped in a cave-in, and I needed something new, so I say, "You look desperate." And I decided to assign a -1 die penalty on any action that wasn't just trying to scramble free. I totally made that up, it was easy, and it fit the scene. So I like the flexibility here, so that's gonna get an up too. And the book gives good advice on when to give these conditions out. I do recommend, however, that you print out a reference or the little cards that Outgunned makes available for this. It just makes it so much easier when you have something physical to hand your players, both to remind you as a GM to assign them during play, and then remind the players which ones they have, since you can kind of stack up a bunch of them at any one time if something really starts going wrong in a scene. There's also rules for dangerous tests, like avoiding traps, where you can lose grit, your hit points, on a failure. And there's also gambles, which are especially risky tests. With gambles, you take damage for each snake eyes, or a 1, that you roll on your dice. It's like the only time in the game that the symbol actually matters on the dice. And you should save gambles for times when your hero's truly doing something epic and risky, like leaping out of a plane and narrowly avoiding a burning jet engine so that he can catch his parachute before he plummets to his death. Combat uses a very similar system. All enemies have grit, hit points, and an attack and a defense rating. So a typical goon might have 6 grit and a basic attack and a basic defense. This means that heroes need to roll a basic success to wound them. If you roll 1 basic success, you do a point of damage. Roll 2 basic successes, you do 2 points of damage. Higher successes do better. A critical success will do 3 damage, for example. Different weapons give different bonuses depending on the situation. So, for example, a rifle gives -2 dice in melee range, but +1 die at medium and long range. After the heroes have taken their swings, the bad guys get to go. And because this is a player-facing system, all the heroes in danger must make a defense roll against the enemy's attacks. And that's something usually like a stunt roll to dive for cover or avoid the melee attacks of the various bad guys. If you fail your roll, well, you take damage. You lose grit. And GMs can batch foes together. So a squad of thugs might still have 6 grit and require a basic success to hit, but they hit harder, requiring a critical success to defend against. Overall, this combat system gets an up for me. Well, there's a lot of ups today. It's fast-paced, it's easy to explain, and I like that GMs can customize foes pretty easily. Now, I will say though, that GMs should be careful here and never run more than 3 enemy groups at a time in Outgunned, otherwise combat will overstay its welcome. Grouping up bad guys is really important in this game. You can also assign bad guys special abilities, giving them feats like automatic weapons, grenades, or dirty tricks. And some bad guys even get their own adrenaline actions, which lets me as a GM spend resources to give those bad guys cool things to do during the combat. So that gets another up for me because I love messing with my players by spending resources, especially when I can't roll dice. The combat system also has some extras that I don't really love. First, there's the brawl system, which simplifies combat down to a single roll. There's not an attack round and a defense round. It's suggested that you should use the brawl system to speed up the game in certain situations, but it doesn't really do a great job explaining what those situations are. So effectively, this means that the book presents two different combat systems, which is confusing. And it leaves me as a GM a little bit bewildered as to which system to use over the other one. I really dislike when games give me two systems for the same thing and let me pick. It's almost like the game designers couldn't decide which one was the better system, so I'm gonna give that a down. I suggest you just ignore this brawl system until you've gotten a lot more familiar with the game and then figure it out for yourself which system you like better. There's also a weak spot system, which allows heroes during combat to spot enemies' Achilles heels during battle. It's basically just a table of random outcomes, which range from letting the players flee from the combat freely, like they spot an escape, or maybe loot a body in the middle of battle. While I like that this system was trying to give heroes that are more intellectual something to do during fights, it just feels really tacked on, and I find that it interrupts the game to use it, so that gets it down too. While I understand what the game was trying to do, I think it's the GM's responsibility to give players who aren't playing combat heroes something special to do during the fights. Relying on a chart just isn't going to cut it, since it takes away agency from those players and the actions that they do may not make sense with what you roll on the chart. If my friend Drake is gunning down thugs and having a great time, and my fast-talking femme fatale wants to be useful, well, she's gonna want to talk her way into the back room at that nightclub to get at the security cameras to locate where the assassin is exactly, not rolling on a random table and finding a crowbar. Outgunned also has a range and cover system, and the game stresses you can totally play it without a map, but I find that it's easier to put little figures down on the table or on a small little board, just so you can tell the distance relationships to each other. Otherwise it can get kind of messy, especially since enemies can kind of group up and be treated as one bad guy, so I find some visual representation on the table really helps, but you can keep it simple. If a hero ever takes enough damage and runs out of grit, they get to play Death Roulette. Here, you're going to roll a regular 6-sided die and try to roll higher than the number of lethal bullets that you have in the chamber drawn on your character sheet. So when you start a game, you just need to roll higher than a 1. That's easy enough. However, every time you succeed one of these rolls, you've narrowly escaped death, and you add another bullet to the chamber, increasing the odds that your hero will eventually fall. If your hero fails one of these rolls, someone can try to save them using something called a spotlight, which is a very rare resource that costs 6 whopping adrenaline to use, or your hero is left for dead. And your group can decide whether they're really dead or they've vanished and there's no body found, and they'll come back at some dramatic point later on in the adventure or campaign. It's up to the group. The death system works well enough, I give it another up, although in a single session, one-shot adventure, you may want to start the PCs with an extra bullet in that chamber, or else a game that's only going to last a couple of hours might become too survivable. Key to any action game are chases. I think chase systems are really tricky in RPGs, and they seem to range from really terrible and confusing and slow, I'm looking at you, Call of Cthulhu, or clever and really good, that's you, GURPS Action, but takes a learning curve for your players, which can then slow down your game just at the wrong moment. Outgunned uses a system where first the GM defines the need, how many chase points the player needs to fulfill his objective in the chase. And then the players have a speed to reach that goal.
I feel the need for speed.
So if Drake is racing down the highway on his cool motorcycle trying to catch that assassin, the GM might say that he has 10 need. Then each turn, usually depending on the hero's vehicle, the hero will earn 1, 2, or 3 chase points, his speed. The driver can describe a cool stunt to increase the speed, like rolling a critical success on a no roll to spot a shortcut, or a dangerous drive roll to weave through traffic. Then the opponent goes, maybe shooting at the heroes or sending a van full of goons to block the players, and the players have to roll not to slow down and lose speed. If a vehicle ever reaches speed 5, every roll is a gamble, which will deal vehicle damage on rolls of snake eyes on those dice. At speed 6, the chase is so dangerous all heroes have to suffer a penalty die, losing a die, and the chase only ends if you fill up your need or your vehicle burns out or time runs out, because a lot of times in chases you are up against a time limit. I really love the chase system here. Outgunned finds a nice balance between using a familiar mechanic that they've used before, but making it feel faster and more frenzied. And it's very simple to explain. You can just like draw it out on a piece of paper and off you go. So this cool system's gonna get another up. And that's Outgunned's mechanics in a nutshell. It's not a hard system to master, but it does take some studying ahead of time because its push your luck elements just, I find, won't be immediately intuitive to your players or GMs. But I found within an hour or so of starting an adventure, everyone grasps the concepts and it's moving pretty fast and they're yelling at each other to push their luck and take bolder actions during the game. So now that you know how the system works, let's talk about character creation. As you'd expect in an action movie game, it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes to create a hero. You pick a role and a trope, and you mash them together to generate your character's attributes and skills. Then, depending on what you combined, you get 3 feats or special abilities. There's a ton of combinations in Outgunned. Roles include all the things you can imagine, like commandos and sleuths and spies, and tropes include things like bad to the bone or leader and die hard. There's about 50 feats included in the book, which give you a combination of free rerolls, bonus dice, or special maneuvers, all specific to your specialty. So a hacker might give you rerolls while using computers, while a heartbreaker gives you rerolls on making good impressions or seducing somebody. The danger of feat systems, I find, is they become too specific and therefore become useless unless the GM tailors their campaign based on their player's selection. But for the most part, Outgunned's feats, I find, are pretty broad and useful. The feat system isn't special enough to get an up or a down. You've seen this sort of thing before, but I found myself wishing that there were more metagame feats that were included. For example, there's one cool feat in the book that gives you a contact, which is something that lets you call in a favor from a special friend in the next scene. This is way more interesting than just a situational reroll, but there really aren't many feats like that. It would have been awesome if more feats had been narratively creative like that. Like maybe there was a feat where you had police rank and you could order around all the beat cops that you come across in the adventure. Or another one that lets you detect lies for a price, like a point of adrenaline. Or another one that gives you more adrenaline anytime you're fighting for your country. But as it's written, Outgunned's feat system is fine, if uninspired, but it's not going to earn any ups or downs. Players also get to pick a flaw for their hero, which gives them a penalty when it comes up in the game. And you can also choose to make your hero old or young, which changes how heroes play. Older heroes get a bonus feat, but are more fragile, while young characters lose a feat, but become too young to die, a special ability which lets them ignore a single bad condition when they get wounded. It's pretty cool. The character creation system is flexible, and you can create most types of characters that you want. I will add that the expansions, the Action Flick supplement, adds both new feats and new tropes, some of which are broadly usable to other genres besides the one they're designed for. For example, there's a Ghostbusters-like one, which has a really useful charming bastard trope, and I let my players use that for virtually any game. But ultimately, the fact that you can create a new character in just a few quick steps gets enough. Now, In my Broken Compass review, I talked about how the skills sometimes had weird overlap between them, making it harder for players to understand what to roll and when to roll it. While it's a little better in Outgunned, there is still some of that issue still here. For example, there's a streetwise skill, but also a detect skill, which says that you can sniff out lies. So which one do you roll against when you're interrogating a mafia goon? And the system has a single know skill, which covers all useful knowledge, which means that your Indiana Jones expert in archaeology is still going to be an expert on using computers, biology, astrophysics, and geopolitics. I don't like when making a smart character makes you exactly the same as every other smart character in the group. The game sometimes uses terminology that's a little different from what you'd expect. Like there's a detect skill and an awareness skill. It would have been a lot more clear if it was called search and the other one was called perception. It's not too bad, and like I said, it is much better than Broken Compass, but I don't know. I think all this skill fuzziness is gonna get it down. Character advancement is pretty limited in Outgunned. You can advance a maximum of 3 times, and each time you get 2 skill points, a bonus feat, and a bonus adrenaline point. Because there's not a lot of granularity in the skills, just 3 levels, any advancement is a big deal. And so you can max out your characters pretty quickly, especially the things that they're good at. There's a system for adding scars and experiences, which give you bonuses when you're in specific situations in the future that resemble the ones in the past, but it's all pretty lightweight. Now, for one-shot adventures and short campaigns, this is all fine. Nobody will care. It works fine. But if you want to keep playing in the same campaign for a while, all the characters are going to feel the same after a while. And while I think you can say like, well, this is an action game, nobody's gonna run long campaigns, like that's not true. I've run many like long-running pulp campaigns. Call of Cthulhu's Two-Headed Serpent is a great example of one that runs for session and session and session. So when judged against other RPGs, the advancement system of Outgunned is going to get a down. The production values, on the other hand, of this game are really strong. The book's full color, nicely bound, the art is well done, it's laid out in simple fashion, and it captures the spirit of what it's going for, with some of the art clearly recalling familiar heroes and villains from pop culture. I love me some Lara Croft. The production values get an up. However, the book has no index, and it really doesn't like to give you page references when you're reading. It'll talk about some system and not tell you where to go to read about it. I really, really hate that. It makes me feel like I am playing a game from the 1980s where they hadn't invented indexes. Anyway, it makes finding stuff in the book you want much harder, so that's going to give it a very, very stern down. Finally, I'll talk about Outgunned's VTT support. I've used virtual tabletops like Roll20 in the past. Now I mostly use Foundry VTT, so I can really only speak to that today. There's a fan-made module for Foundry, which is pretty bare bones, but it does have the basics of what you need. The character sheet's in there, it handles the rolling and re-rolling pretty well, and it looks like it's getting supported. But it's not completely there yet. Doing some of the other systems in the game get tricky over VTT. I still think it runs a little better at the real tabletop versus the virtual one. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give the VTT support a very gentle down. Although I really hope that the fans and Two Little Mice can advance this along and get it across the finish line. It's already an improvement of what was there in Broken Compass, so fingers crossed. Oh, and I almost forgot, Outgunned does feature an adventure in the back of the book, which I love when RPGs do this so that game masters don't have to just instantly make up something themselves while they're learning a new game system. It's called Race Against Time, and it's got everything you expect in a 1980s style action adventure. The heroes are chasing after a mysterious briefcase on board a plane while there's black-clad mercenaries and terrorists involved and free-falling out of the plane. It's basically everything you'd expect in a 1980s action movie adventure, but well done, Outgunned, for including an adventure with it. That gets an up. I've gotten Outgunned to the table several times, and overall, it's a system I really like. It's definitely a refinement of Broken Compass, and for me, completely replaces that game. I like that Outgunned is in between a rules light game and a rules crunchy game, which I think is the right place to land for an action-adventure RPG. When my heroes are chasing assassins up skyscrapers and fighting their way through goons while a chopper blazes away at them from above, I want there to be enough rules to capture the flavor and the danger and excitement of that scenario, but not too many rules that it slows down the action. I want a game where weapon selection matters so that heroes don't all feel the same, and that players can build characters that in the modern era feel different from each other, which can sometimes be tricky when you don't have a class-based game like you see in fantasy games. I also want a system in an action game that never punishes the players for doing too many crazy stunts unless they go too far. And I think Outgunned captures all of this really, really, really well. I totally recommend it. It's flexible, it's cinematic, it has unique game mechanics, and character creation is a complete snap. If you've played other RPGs, it's around the same complexity level as maybe the old West End games D6 system or Savage Worlds, maybe just a little bit more streamlined than that one. The only folks I wouldn't recommend Outgunned to are the ones who like a lot of tactical crunch. Like if you're a Tom Clancy fan and you like your AK-47s to be mechanically different from your M16s, or you want your players to really fear stray bullets and dive for cover any chance they get and play realistically, then you'll probably prefer other game systems. This is just not that type of game, and there's not that kind of granularity here. And if you're looking for something to run a long-running campaign with, well, Outgunned's advancement system will probably fall short for your player group. But at the end of the day, Outgunned is my preferred system for whenever I'm in the mood to run something fast and furious for my friends. For those of you interested in trying Outgunned out, I've ported my 1960s spy adventure Never Forget to Die over to Outgunned, which you can download for free at oneshotadventures.com. If you're a fan of old school 007 style action, this adventure hits the heroes against a brilliant chemist who has discovered a formula to make foes entirely forget sections of their lives. It's pretty fun and cool, and I think it works really well with Outgunned's rule system. Have you played Outgunned, and do you have strong opinions on it? I'd love to know what you think or what your experiences were like. Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, if you found this video helpful, go ahead and punch that like and subscribe button like you would an ugly thug glaring at you in that mob-infested nightclub. Then you'll get more video reviews like this one in the future. Until next time, I'm JC, and I don't have time to talk. I've got to get to the chopper!